Welcome everyone to the Performance and Capacity stream. My name is Piara and I'll be chairing this session. We're very pleased to have Michael McKay from Rocket Software presenting on modernizing mainframe storage and performance. We're going to have some time towards the end to ask Michael any questions, and there's also going to be some interaction during the middle of the presentation. So please do make use of the chat box if you have any questions or feedback. Or alternatively, if you prefer to speak and ask a question, do let me know and I can unmute you towards the end. As with all of our sessions, we would appreciate if you could leave us some feedback, and I'm going to put a link in the chat box to the feedback page, which just takes 60 seconds to complete, but we'd really appreciate if you could do that. And I'm now going to hand it over to you, Michael, to start the presentation.
Great, thank you very much. So hi everyone, I'm Michael McKay. I'm a sales engineer at Rocket Software. And today we will be talking to you about modernizing mainframe storage and performance to build business resilience. So a little bit of background on myself. I was a storage administrator and then eventually a sysprog at a UK retail bank for 7 years. And since then, fairly recently, I've joined Rocket Software. So I've done this is now my third talk at GSE in Northampton. If some of you were there last year, I did a talk on open app tools on the mainframe. And yesterday I did a talk on hybrid cloud, specifically kind of touching on hybrid cloud storage. So that's me. My colleague John Crossnow delivered a similar session to this last year. So if any of you were in attendance, some of this information might be somewhat similar, but yeah, let's dive right in. So here's today's agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about business resilience. Then we'll go on to talk about storage challenges and growth. We'll touch on system health and talk a bit about HSM. Then that'll lead us into catalog health and maintenance, tape storage and hybrid cloud, and then we'll touch on performance a little bit at the very end here. So let's talk about business resilience first. So a lot of different organizations have different definitions of business resilience, right? I'm sure you've heard this term a million times, but when I'm saying at this session, I'll define it as an organization's ability to adapt when disruptions occur and maintain business operations while keeping staff, data, and your company's reputation safe. So specifically today, I'm going to talk a lot about the storage aspect of business resilience. Talking about system health in particular, because system health is core to your business resilience, right? To that point, data storage and system performance are critical to systems health, right? So if you see over here on the right, we've got some kind of key topics in storage and performance spaces. We've got business continuity, disaster recovery, backup restore SLA compliance, and performance. We have health monitoring, capacity planning, etc. So we'll touch on some of these topics in a minute. But first, let's talk about storage challenges and growth. So you guys have probably seen similar stats in the past, right? Data is growing. Z systems generate 75% of all enterprise data. So this is a kind of a ballpark figure. It's I've seen a lot of stats that say 70%. I see a lot of stats say 80%, but roughly about 75% of all your enterprise data comes from a Z system. And a second stat here, Z systems generate 70% of operational data for large enterprises, banks and retailers. So a lot of this data floating out there, of course, is created by our mainframes, as we know, and it's growing at a rapid rate. So storage growth. Data creation and replication will grow at a faster rate than installed storage capacity. This is a stat from IDC. So how can data creation grow faster than the storage capacity you have, right? Well, that's basically because we throw away a lot of our data. We create data, we replicate data, think of your backups, your replication, and then we throw most of it away. And actually, some of that data could be valuable even, but we simply don't have the space for it, right? So, we just throw it away, potentially lose some valuable data we can have insights into. So in 2020, 64.2 zettabytes of data was created or replicated. The amount of digital data created over the next 5 years will be greater than twice the amount of data created since the advent of digital storage. So, I mean, this is, an insane amount of storage. Every time you create data or replication to secondary or your tertiary storage, whether that's virtual tape, physical tape, possibly, it's sitting out in a warehouse somewhere, that all counts to this newly generated data as well. So even if it's copies of existing data. So that means growth, right? So growth drives increased costs. And a lot of organizations are asking themselves, well, how can you handle this increased growth? Do your existing processes account for this growth? And will you be able to scale your existing processes into the future to handle all this extra data? Will it account for the time it takes to perform your backups, for example? You might have, or you could even talk about your batch window, for example. Are these filling up? Do you need to buy more storage? Do you need more processing? And lastly, how does this all affect the health of your system? So you'll see a lot of surveys talking about security as the main focus for organizations, and that's true. It is a massive concern of a lot of organizations. But if we're talking about operationally speaking, outages and keeping the cost of storage at bay are the top priorities for a lot of organizations. And that's specifically what we're focusing here today. So, okay, system health and HSM, right? So how does system health relate to these three big topics here: business continuity, disaster recovery, and backup and restore? So when we're talking about business continuity, think about your storage systems that replicate data to another system, and that could be synchronously or asynchronously. And in the case of an outage, you can fail over to that system and your time to get back online is much shorter. But a problem there could be, did your applications lose any data during the failover process? How long did it take to fail over? Was there gaps and data lost to your applications? Disaster recovery, you take your backups, of course, you've got your DR images sitting wherever they're sitting. Your system faces an outage and you have to fail over to these environments. How long are you out for? What's your RTO, your recovery time objective? And then, of course, backup and restore, just very traditional. Back everything up. Oops, say your application has data integrity issues, back up what's existing, restore, etc. We do this every day. So how does system health relate to these three topics? Well, as I said previously, system health is core to business resilience. And business resilience in this case is, how do we make our business resilient to the things that will stop our business operating? So, as I say, for example, outages. And the impact on business resiliency is reflected on long data recovery times, SLA compliance. So as your data and your environments grow, more and more data coming in, it takes longer to perform processes against all that data. And will that impact your SLAs? Going back to the batch window example, say you have 8 hours for your batch, what happens when you start coming up to that 8-hour window? What happens when you exceed it? So we're kind of constringent on a lot of these SLAs. Right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about HSM specifically. So most people here, I imagine, would use HSM. If you don't, actually, I'd be curious to see if anyone, says anything in the chat there. Not all organizations do, but most do, right? So so how did the processing go last night, for example? the migration of your data sets? Was there any failures? Do you know what failed? Are you having repeating or repetitive migration failures that you maybe don't know about? Um, if that's the case, why do you not know about it, right? Are you not reporting on them, perhaps? Maybe you don't have the tools to accurately track or report these failures. Maybe you don't have someone checking every day, the logs that you're taking, or do you even need to do that? It's a pretty manual, boring task. I remember having to do it as a storage admin myself. And the crux of this is, are these failures affecting your performance? If it's happening every night and nobody knows about it, yeah, I mean, it could be affecting your performance, right? So are your migration policies in tune with your current business environment? Do they have to be updated as your environment grows? Are they draining CPU resources, wasting the ASD space? That might cause you to have to do a CPU upgrade or add additional storage to your environment. All because, your resources are getting wasted. And what does that kind of cause? Well, of course, increased costs. So, of course, not only increased costs, but all of this can lead to potential risk of data loss. So reduce this risk, and how to reduce this risk is really a case of looking at the health of your HSM environment and ask yourself, is there anything here we can improve? Is there any processes we can put in place? Is there anything we can automate? Is there better practices to track our HSM processing? So, okay, we're going to talk about the importance of HSM tools, not specifically any tools, of course, but just kind of more theoretically. So, what if you lost an HSM migration or a backup tape? Do you have a quick, easy recovery procedure here? If not, it could be a pretty time-consuming process to, figure out how to recover, say, a control data set going down. I can talk to my own experience. I'm sure some of you experienced it. When I was fairly new I think I was just a sysprog, and the other storage admin guy was off, and I was covering storage, and we had a bit of a CDS issue, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, like whatever the issue is, I'll just reorg the control data set, fix the issue, we'll be fine. And I totally took out the control data set. Sure, I took a backup beforehand, but it took me, probably upwards of half a day to fix this issue. It was on a development environment, sure, but you best believe in 15 minutes time, all these developers are coming to me and, saying like, what's going on? Why can I not migrate? Why can I not, recall my data sets? And that was because of me, right? So, and that was mostly due to, I guess one, my own ignorance, but two, we didn't have the proper controls in place. We didn't have documented procedures. We didn't have the tools that helped me resolve these issues, right? So it put us in a bit of a sticky situation. So, yeah. So, more on kind of control data sets. How often do you guys reorganize these data sets? Do you just do it at the end of the month? Do you do it when you need to? Do you do it when it's convenient for you? I used to have calendar entries, and we would just do it every month or so, my old organization. So why not just do it when it's needed, right? Why waste your time reorging when you don't need to? Why do it at a specified time every month? Do it when you need to. Keep it a standard process, right? And what about reporting and auditing on your HSM environment? It's pretty important. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So, okay, we'll start with audit, right? So how important really is it to audit your HSM control data sets, for example? And I would argue that it's very important. How can you determine the health of them otherwise? So not knowing the integrity of the environment impacts your ability to do critical operations such as recalling data, as I mentioned previously, or recovering data. Has anyone else messed up a control data set and suffered the consequences? I'm sure there's some stories here. We'll get on to talk about catalogs a bit later. That's one you don't want to mess up, but I've heard some stories. And yeah, so performing audits will help you identify inconsistencies and errors. So now you know what's wrong in your environment. And I guess a step after that is then how do you fix those errors, right? Do you have the tools or the capabilities or the processes to allow you to fix that? Or are you going to be like me, where I was, essentially Googling everything and trying to work it out? It was a good learning experience, to be fair, but not what you want to do, especially if it was a production environment, right? Um, so yeah, kind of linking this to catalogs then. Let's look at ICF catalogs for a minute. It's kind of the same thing, right? What's the accuracy of your catalog content? Can you schedule regular audits? And most importantly, audits that don't impact your performance on production environments, for example. And I guess basically the crux of this is, by auditing your environment, you can eliminate integrity and out of sync conditions. So performing regular audits helps maintain the complex data structure of DFS HSM control data sets and other similar technologies. And most of all, it prevents outages and improves the efficiency of your system. Okay, let's talk about reporting then. So, in the same vein as auditing, of course, it's great to report on your HSM control data sets. By running health reports, you can see things such as the status of HSM automatic functions, HSM activities performed since the last swap log, historical information on migration and recall activities, or maybe backup and recovery activities. Um, you know, uh, Tools could help with this. Okay, sure. As I say, procedures can help you with this. Sharing knowledge with your colleagues and sharing knowledge with the wider world. I'm sure all of us have gone out here onto mainframe forums and asked a question, and you scroll down, and the guy's like, "Read the manual," And yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, there's tons of information out there. The problem is when you're in a sticky situation, you don't really have time to trawl through 1,000-page manual, do you? So, anyway, volume dump reporting, right? This is another thing here. So this can impact your ability to recover a volume or perhaps a single data set. So reporting really lets you see what's happening on your environment. And I would argue that's half the battle. If you know what's going on, then you can find out ways to fix it. Great. If anyone's got any questions, fire in the chat. Feel free to stop me. It's all good. Or any sort of comments. Happy to take any. But if not, we're going to kind of move past HSM and we'll talk a little bit about your catalog health and maintenance. So, okay, catalog health. So of course you want to ensure good catalog health because that can prevent potential loss of access to data, which is of course paramount, right? Has any of you had a lost catalog or a corrupted catalog or some sort of catalog issue, perhaps on a production environment? What happens? Okay, you can't access your data. Your applications can't access your data. So, what does that lead to? Production outages. And of course, production outages can cost your organization essentially millions of pounds, right? So, ICF catalogs fail, and this could be due to, environmental disasters, human error, hardware, software, malicious attacks, and the impact really can be severe. And in a time where there's more and more regulations coming into the place, all the time, you look at, for example, the DORA EU regulation that's been announced somewhat recently. Organizations are terrified, and rightly so, of how much these outages can cost your business if you don't have the correct controls in place. So, okay, catalog maintenance, right? So the ability to perform catalog maintenance without taking your catalog offline, I'd argue is pretty important, right? And I'm not going to talk about any tools or anything here. There's several on the market. But it's kind of more just an example here of what the case scenario can be in certain shops, right? So of course, these are estimated times, but if you don't have the correct controls in place, if you don't have a disaster recovery procedure of some kind, and not all procedures are fit exactly for every small problem, of course, or you don't have a tool, or you don't have the knowledge, or whatever the case may be, the resources, you're talking a long recovery time, up to 8 hours or something to recover a catalog. And that can, of course, be reduced. And by reducing that, you're essentially saving your organization a lot of money because you're saving it a lot of downtime. And so what happens when there's downtime other than your production costs? Well, your applications remain available and people continue doing their job. Okay, so that's enough about catalogs. Let's talk about tape storage and hybrid cloud. I did a session on hybrid cloud yesterday where I talked a bit about tape storage. You can find the slides online on the GSC website. But anyway, slightly different than this content here. So tape management, right? How many people here have spent time working with some of these old tape drives? I'm sure we're all familiar with tapes. I worked in decommissioning a tape drive, which was essentially a case of going in and taking out like 3,000 tapes and putting it in a big wheelbarrow and moving across the data center and doing that again and again. Companies are moving off physical tape now, for the most part, from what I've seen anyway, and moving to, virtual tape libraries now. And, going forward into the future, now people are starting to adopt cloud solutions too. So why, right? Why do you do this? Why are organizations doing this? Well, I think you need the ability to copy tape to any media going forward, and that could be for data consistency, maybe deriving insights on tape data. That's really difficult if you've got everything locked in a physical tape library, for example. And getting your data enabled for even things like AI ops. Moving your data onto the public cloud for AI and machine learning. This is something that companies are doing now. And of course, the big one is as well saving money. Tons of organizations are moving off their mainframe data, their tape data on physical or virtual tape to the cloud, saving themselves some money. You don't have the spinning disks in your data center. They have to power, that you have to cool, that you have to maintain. People are just putting it over its cloud. It's a slow adoption, but it's happening, right? So hybrid cloud, right? On that kind of topic, essentially. Do any of your data centers have storage units that harbor open system storage, for example? You can now actually move your mainframe data onto these storage devices, and maybe it's cheaper, right? You got a VTL sitting here half full, got an open systems storage device here half full. Why not just move all your tapes into that and then get rid of your VTL? Surely that would save you money, right? Maybe you could derive better insights into your data if they all exist on one box in the same format. Makes it easier to move, makes it easier to be accessed from developers in different teams as well. Yeah, so you might reduce your on-site costs. You might reduce the workload on your mainframe storage admins, right? Offload it over to the open system guys. So their problem now, kind of. And the important thing is that even if you do this, you can still get to your data, right? So in DR scenarios, you can still recover it. Is it as fast recovery as VTL? Probably not, but it's, technology is getting better. It's pretty close. You're talking seconds here, so, it's something to consider. And maybe it'll mitigate damage of ransomware. People think the mainframe's a really secure environment. Of course it is. Probably one of the best. But there's talks of ransomware attacks on the mainframe. There's been a few sessions at other um, events similar to GSE, and people talk about this sort of stuff, right? It's not out of the question. So let's kind of push the conversation further when talking about hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud on the mainframe combines the use of your traditional DASD with off-platform services. So you could be talking, like I said previously, on-premises open system storage, right? Mix your open system data with your cloud data. Or maybe we're talking about public and private cloud, Um, so in my opinion, and the opinion of most industries that I've seen and worked with so far, is that the primary usage of cloud in a mainframe environment is specifically aligned to your augmenting your VLT systems, right? So taking your virtual tape library, taking cold storage and moving it away to the cloud and forget about it, type of thing, right? There's a stat I've got later on from Gartner, and basically it says roughly 60% of all tape data that hasn't been accessed in 90 days never gets accessed again. So this is what I would call cold storage, right? It sits there and you might need it for regulation purposes. You might need it because what if one day I need to recover from 2 months ago? But really, you don't really often, do you? Most of the time, you'll recover from yesterday or last week. But we take precaution, of course, we do. So organizations now are saying, well, if I'm spending X on cold data on my VTL, if I can offload that onto the cloud, make a cost savings, and I'm not recalling that data, then it's a win-win. Organizations are even putting DR images on the cloud. When do you need a DR image? Well, either during a DR test, which is maybe twice a year, or in a natural disaster. So fairly uncommon, right? So of course, for those that don't know, cloud services are cheaper in general than having kind of your physical storage in your data center. The way they make money is through recalling data. So if you shove your data off into the cloud and then you're recalling it every day, you incur costs. You're probably going to end up spending more money. But if you offload cold data, as I say, then you can potentially have a cost saving there, right? Okay, so yes, it's kind of more on this topic. Hybrid cloud could give you a sort of ML3 live environment, right? You could write to storage appliances, as I say, ones differing than what you have already. You could put your backups, say, on a VTL and then cold storage on the cloud. And you can even actually just go ahead and cut out the middleman and write directly from the mainframe to the cloud. Organizations are doing this now as well. Anything to save money, right? So it depends on the organization, depends on what's right for you, but there certainly are options out there and people are looking at these options, right? Hybrid cloud adoption is growing incredibly fast. And this is definitely something that you need to start paying attention to. So what are the benefits? You can meet your RPO and RTO objectives, right? Your recovery point, recovery time objectives, reduce costs of secondary storage. I talked on that a lot. And a big one I didn't touch on too much, derive insights from secondary storage. So I think of it as you got your distributed guys over here looking at data insights of all their machines. You got your mainframe guys doing the exact same thing on their storage. And it's particularly difficult to look at, like, say, tape storage, get insights there. But if you had like a lot or most or all of your data on the cloud all in one format, it's just one operation to look at the data there to kind of derive insights or use it, as I say, for AI. So in that sense, it's a lot easier. So cloud, yeah. Cloud is probably the fastest growing sector in storage. I say probably no, it is. um, you know, mostly on premises for larger organization enterprises. People aren't too keen on putting your mainframe data on the cloud just yet. Some people are, but right now we're talking mostly on premises. IBM and Amazon are top cloud providers for smaller COS shops. And currently about 35% of organizations plan to use the cloud, and that number is only going to increase. I can promise you that. Though don't send me an email in a couple of years saying you promised. But yeah, many cannot connect to cloud providers from production. Makes sense, right? A lot of people want their mainframe data on the mainframe, nowhere else. Fair enough. But under the right infrastructure, you can not only survive, but you can actually thrive with a cloud environment. Cost savings, data insights, have the best of both worlds. Get quick access to your data. Another one that I'll touch on a little bit later is enabling next-gen developers. Do any organizations here have a bit of a skill gap or a knowledge gap in your mainframe environment? People talk about mainframers retiring. How do we get people to fill their boots? People aren't that interested in mainframe technology. Younger people coming up through school and university, maybe as much as they once were, right? So, and that could be through a variety of different ways. But opening up the mainframe to open source and to cloud, to these technologies that allows people who are using, say, tools like VS Code to develop. You can now utilize like open source free tools you can get on your mainframe, and you can start interacting with mainframe users and training people that way. Or Zoe, for example. How many organizations here use Zoe? These are all to enable kind of the next gen to work on the mainframe. You don't have to get rid of your mainframe. You can just modernize it. Yeah, so automated and surgical data recovery, and of course, the cloud allows your environment to be scalable, right? Data is growing. We've talked about this before. Is your organization ready to scale with the data? Maybe you need to look at cloud solutions, for example. Offload your cold storage to the cloud so that you have more space in your VTL for backups. Stats I've seen before. Usually your backup environment, say your VTL, is roughly 10 times the amount of storage that your production environment is. That's your mainframe DASI. 10 times as much storage is spent in your tape libraries for backups. So, it's a lot of data. Lastly here, we're going to talk a little bit about performance. So as I say, anyone feel free to stop me if you got any questions or anything, but let's talk a little bit about mainframe performance and capacity, right? So here's some stats. So 85% of IT decision makers are increasing funds for IT infrastructure outside the public cloud. So we're just talking about how cloud was a massive focal point. But if you're omitting cloud from the conversation, what are the kind of key focal points of organizations? Well, security, of course, but what about optimization? That leads to cost cuts, of course. That's getting more and more attention these days too. 68% of mainframe customers expect MIPS to grow. So growing MIPS, what does growing MIPS mean? Growing costs. What does growing costs mean? Cost reduction, right? 52% rank cost optimization as the highest priority. There you go. To my earlier point, right? And a number of mainframe pros with 20 plus years experience decreased significantly since 2019. So, we talked about it before too. There's a skills gap developing, and it's continuing to develop. What are we doing about it? Zoe, open source tools, but what else? Maybe better ways of data analytics. What about automation? Plug the skills gap by reducing the amount of mundane tasks, say a storage administrator needs to do on a daily basis, right? Maybe you can cut the team down by a few members. Of course, that means loss of jobs, of course. I know no one's advocating that, but Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about performance solution set. So a focus on performance and capacity planning can help you achieve a few outcomes. The following being improved system and application availability, right? So we mentioned earlier about the high costs associated with applications being unavailable. Let's mitigate those risks and the associated costs. Proactively identifying issues. So I'm talking things like tools, or processes. Even doesn't have to be a tool for application monitoring. Proactive management of things like catalogs and control sets. Don't be reactive, be proactive. Um, does everyone know what to do if an ICS catalog gets corrupted? Can you recover it? Leverage knowledge of communities around you, you know, forums online, free forums, tons of them. There's content out there for you to read, more than just manuals. There's people you can talk to for free, you don't have to pay support contracts, but if you do, you've got people like that as well. But colleagues and there's tons of communities around you to leverage for environment optimization, right? Reduce mean time to repair. So like we spoke about earlier, the longer it takes to fix issues, the higher the downtime, which means more cost for your business. So adopt best practices, follow industry trends, etc. Kind of reduce the time to repair. Integrate performance management. So this could be via strict controls you set in your environment, or as I say, automation. So in a batch process, for example, you want to talk about your batch, right? If you optimize your buffering, for example, you can reduce your batch window and free up CPU. So it increases performance, got an 8-hour batch window, reduce that down to 4 hours, you can get right onto kind of any other sort of processing right afterwards, reduces the amount of time that your batch guys have to get called in the middle of the night as well to come and fix issues. You know, makes them less grouchy in the morning when you're when you're asking them a question, right? Of course. But stuff like batch optimization is our manual tasks. They're difficult. So why not look to automate these tasks? If you can, and you can kind of achieve a good outcome, it benefits your overall performance, and it makes the job on your colleagues and yourself a little bit easier, and allows your organization to be scalable and easy to use. So when you retire or your colleague retires and someone else comes in, it's easier to kind of let them know this is what's happening, this is how this is automated, etc. Right? Yeah, so ease of use, I kind of captured that there. And then of course, reduce your TCO, right? So optimize your storage infrastructure, whatever that may be, hybrid cloud storage, your HSM environment, whatever, your catalogs, etc. Your batch, your processes, free up resources, plug your skill gaps, and reduce your total cost of ownership. So, okay, that's most of the presentation done. So we'll just recap on some important steps here to remember for the future. So number one, adopt solutions, whatever that is. I'm not going to give you a sales pitch. I'm not talking about any specific solutions. But homegrown appliances are tough to manage. What happens when the developer goes? You know, what are you supposed to do? Do you know how to work that application, that appliance? Could take a lot of training, right? Your spaghetti code can make things a little bit, tougher as years go by, and you have to add in new functionalities. So that's always a risk. Enable best practices. So let's make sure we're using the best practices consistently all the time. And how do you do that? Just go out there and find your information online. There's tons of stuff online. And lastly, meet the availability demands of your business. So one of the most important things, right? We don't want to face an outage. None of us want to be called in the middle of the night, etc. We all want to have everything running smoothly. Um, that's and so does your organization, of course, from a cost perspective. So let's meet those SLAs that are set out for us. And that's me. So we're a little bit early. If anyone's got any sort of questions, happy to have a discussion here. But if not, thank you very much for attending. If you could please give any sort of session feedback, that would be much appreciated.
Thanks very much, Michael. We'll just give it a few seconds if anyone does want to ask any questions. Sandeep just messaged me, where can I download the presentation? I believe this presentation will be available from the actual website as well. So once you click on the particular agenda item and scroll down to the bottom, there should be a link to download. But I think it's going to go live probably after this conversation, conference is over. So I think maybe give it up to 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and upload a PDF version of this presentation. If anyone wants to get it earlier, feel free to send me an email. It's mmackay@rocketsoftware.com. And I'm happy to share with you any of this content here.
Brilliant. So
I'll
we've
put
got
that in the chat.
Oh, fantastic. And we've got no other questions coming in at the moment. So I think we can give 3 minutes back to or longer, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, 15
Yeah,
minutes or
15
so.
minutes
So
back to everyone. Well, as there are no questions, thank you so much, Michael, for the presentation. If you do want to get in touch with Michael after the presentation, if you've got any questions, then there's the email in the chat box, so you can do that.
great. Thank you everyone for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers
Bye-bye.
all. Bye bye.
Yes.